The world calls for them to stop, but Israel remains defiant in its expansion of settlements on occupied land. But in Jerusalem, Arabs are resorting to a new survival technique, buying homes in those settlements. A smart move or a plan that'll backfire in the long term? Jerusalem, the settlements and those who lay claim to them. This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. Settlements, neighbourhoods, suburbs, call them what you will. In Jerusalem, they are a reality and for some, the biggest sticking point in moving a stalled Middle East peace process forward. Why? Because according to much of the international community, they're illegal and compounded by Israel's unwillingness to grant planning permits to Palestinians in the city. So what to do? Well, remember that phrase, if you can't beat them, join them? Well, that could be applied to the hundreds of Palestinians who are now trying to buy houses in Jerusalem's Israeli settlements. Now, for some, it's just not right. Palestinians believe that Jerusalem is historically theirs and that Israelis have no real claim to the old city. These pictures are from the early 1930s, before Israel existed, and at a time when the city was part of the British Mandate of Palestine. It was when Israel was created in 1948 that Jerusalem became so much more contentious. Here it is on the map, the first Arab-Israeli war of that same time. And afterwards an armistice was agreed which divided the city of Jerusalem in two, that green line. Israel controlled the west, Jordan took the east. That changed though after the second war in 1967 when Israel occupied East Jerusalem before officially annexing it in 1980. And have a look at today, more than 4 decades later. This is what the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem look like. It is more than just a divided city. It is a fractured and contested one. We're going to talk more about these attempts by Palestinians to claim back what they say is their land. But before that, Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Tadros takes us on a journey of the area with the people from both sides who inhabit it.
He's Palestinian living in Jerusalem and looking to buy a home for his family in an Israeli settlement.
I've been looking for a house in a settlement in East Jerusalem for 2 years now. The rent in Arab neighborhoods around here is too high. There are problems with permits, so we can't even build homes, or they're demolished. Also, I have to live in Jerusalem, or the Israelis will take away my ID card, and I won't be able to enter even though I work in Jerusalem.
Hundreds of Palestinians are buying or already living in Israeli settlements. Many feel they have no other choice due to Israel's policies designed, they say, to discriminate and diminish Palestinian presence in Jerusalem. One of the ways Israel tries to entice young Jews to live in settlements is by making houses affordable here and offering good services. Meanwhile, in this Arab neighborhood, just a few minutes' drive from that settlement, construction has all but stopped as Israeli authorities refuse to give the permits to Palestinians to build homes, driving up the prices. Mohammed Dahle has represented more than 20 Palestinian families buying homes in settlements.
It hasn't become something that is a national effort. I mean, people are doing this on an individual basis. And they are doing that because of many reasons, the main reason being necessity. Many Palestinians don't have any housing solution anymore, and Israel is pushing them out of the municipal borders of Jerusalem, out of the wall that Israel has built, and therefore they are cutting them off from their life inside Jerusalem.
As there's no legal reason why Palestinians can't buy, the problem is mostly social. Israeli owners are reluctant to sell to Arabs, many of whom refuse to buy stolen land they see as belonging to fellow Palestinians. Reems was one of the first Palestinian families to move into the settlement of Pisgat Ze'ev in occupied East Jerusalem 10 years ago. She admits not all Palestinians approve of where she lives.
I tell them they should be happy with me. Jews don't usually sell to Arabs, so if I manage to buy a house or even two, then it's recorded in my name, the name of an Arab. I've taken back this tiny bit of Palestinian land and made it my own.
Outside, we found one of the settlers living next door to Reem. I wanted to just ask you what you thought of your Arab neighbors.
It's good that we can live together. We are working together now too, so I don't see any problem.
But not everyone feels the same, and as more Palestinians buy, some think resentment will rise, possibly leading to long-term change.
Fact is that Israelis do not want to live with Palestinians. So Palestinians do buy in these settlements. Eventually, settlers or Israelis who are living in these settlements might just leave. And if they leave, then basically these settlements will be owned back by Palestinians.
Though not a widespread phenomena, it is a growing trend. As Israel continues to build on stolen land, some Palestinians are changing the balance, one house at a time. Shireen Tadros for Inside Story in occupied East Jerusalem.
All right, let's bring in our guests. Now in Bethlehem is Jad Ishaq. He is the director of the Applied Research Institute of Jerusalem. In Jerusalem itself is Danny Seideman, a lawyer and legal counsel to Ir Amim, an Israeli NGO concerned with the future of the city. And also in Jerusalem, rounding out our panel, is Shmuel Berkovich. He is also a lawyer and an expert on Jerusalem affairs. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on Inside Story. Jad Ishaq, I'd like to come to you first. If we put this in some sort of context, it is a relatively small number of Palestinians who are buying these houses. However, how big a deal is it? Is it a really big deal for a Palestinian to be buying land in a settlement?
Well, I don't think that it's a big deal. And the numbers is really relatively very little compared to the number of dwellings which the Palestinians in East Jerusalem require in order to accommodate for their needs. What I would like you to know is that since 1967, Israel built more than 50,000 apartments for settlers in East Jerusalem, but they granted Palestinians less than 1,000 units all throughout this period. But actually what the Palestinians need is at least 1,500 apartments every year. So it's this policy of discrimination which the Israeli government, the repeated Israeli governments have been practicing against the Palestinians. It's what's driving the Palestinians to find accommodation somewhere else.
So you don't think it could cause friction between Palestinians, those who say, I need a house, I'm going to go and look for a house in an Israeli settlement, and those who say you shouldn't be buying a house on what we say is our land?
Why? It's the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and the whole international community considers East Jerusalem to be an occupied territory. Therefore, Israel is the one which has no right to build settlements, and it's the settlers who are not legal. They are occupying Palestinian land against the international will and the international law. It's them who should not be there, not the Palestinians. The Palestinians are claiming their housing rights on the Palestinian land. I think that it's a twisted argument. It should be the other way around.
Okay, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk more about.
To insinuate.
No, I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just asking the questions. But we are going to talk more about those wider issues about Jerusalem a little later in the program. I'd like to bring in Shmuel Berkovich in Jerusalem right now. Is this, in the end, perhaps a practical move that housing is getting expensive in parts of Jerusalem, as we saw in our report, and Palestinians are just looking for any option?
Well, first of all, I have to oppose to your opening words, calling these Jewish neighborhoods a settlement. Maybe you think all Jerusalem is a settlement, and if I understood correctly what you said in the beginning, you are not happy even for the existence of West Jerusalem. But I must remind you the history that after the partition decision of... Let me finish my sentence. I wanted to remind you that according to the United Nations partition resolution, there should be an international Jerusalem, and the Jewish leadership agreed to this idea, but the Arabs in Israel and 5 Arabic states invaded Israel in order to make this decision a failure. So this was the outcome of this war was the establishment of West Jerusalem. And after the 6-day war, again, Israel actualized its international right for self-defense when Jordan attacked Israel, and then Israel occupied East Jerusalem. So I must say this is not according to international law, but it is according to the international law, the right for self-defense. So everything
what I would say
by
to that,
conquering or by occupying Jerusalem is a legitimate step.
What I would say to that, though, I'll come back to you in a moment, Jadishak. Just hold on one moment, if you wouldn't mind. What I would say is that you questioned whether I was calling them settlements. I wasn't calling them. I could quote any number of UN Security Council resolutions, members who have called them settlements themselves. The EU calls them settlements, referring to ones we've had in our reports. So I think the word settlement is one which comes from broad members of the international community. Jadishak, a quick reply from you, because I'd like to talk to Danny Seideman.
Well, I think that even Resolution 242, which is the basis of the peace process, says the non-admissibility of acquiring land by force. The whole international community, including the ICJ, states clearly that East Jerusalem is occupied. And I don't know this tone of the language that's coming from this lawyer. I think he should question the way he presents realities and distorts facts.
Danny Seideman in Jerusalem, I'd like to bring you into the conversation and refer back to what we are talking about, this specific topic of Palestinians buying in Israeli settlements. I want to know your legal view on this, because if a Palestinian is to buy a home in what is considered an illegal settlement, and then one day that settlement is torn down, let's say there is a decision on Jerusalem, I mean, what's the legal standing on this if you're buying land or buying a house on what you yourself believe is illegal?
I believe it's a mistake to view this through purely legal, in purely legal terminology. And I find myself between my two friends, Jad Isak and Shmuel Berkovich. In the eyes of most Israelis, these neighborhoods are neighborhoods and not settlements. In the eyes of the Palestinians and much of the international community, these indeed are settlements. That is precisely what needs be resolved in a final status agreement. And what the final status agreement needs address is that the 190,000 Israelis who now live on what was once Palestinian land will in all likelihood become part of Israel. Israel will need pay for that in the framework of a 1-to-1 ratio land swap. I believe that Palestinians moving into these Israeli neighborhoods/settlements are of curiosity value. They are not significant in number, nor do they have broad-reaching political ramifications. However, this does disclose a deep humanitarian problem. By constructing the separation security wall, Ariel Sharon cut off hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their environs in the West Bank, and tens of thousands of Palestinians who threatened to be cut off from Jerusalem came back to the city, and they don't have where to live. Jerusalemites, Israelis and Palestinians want to lead parallel lives. Palestinians do not want to live in the same neighborhoods as Israelis, and Israelis do not want to live in the same neighborhoods as Palestinians. But out of desperation, Palestinians are being compelled to move into these Israeli neighborhoods because they have nowhere else to live. So this discloses a stark humanitarian reality. I doubt very much if this will have far-reaching political ramifications.
We're talking Jerusalem today, the settlements and the moves made to both expand and combat them. Our guests are Danny Seideman and Shmuel Berkovich in Jerusalem and Jad Ishak in Bethlehem. Gentlemen, I mentioned the word expand there. But really, this goes beyond the expansion of settlements, as you've all referred to. It goes to the very heart of what the city of Jerusalem truly is. Let's hear now from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu upon his return from a recent trip to the United States.
It was very important for me to come back from the US visit and participate in this ceremony, and to say here the same things I said in the United States. The United Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. Jerusalem was always ours and will always be ours. It will never again be partitioned or divided.
Shmuel Berkovich in Jerusalem, let me come to you. We hear what The Prime Minister says there, Benjamin Netanyahu, how is it, in your view, that he remains so defiant about Jerusalem and about settlements, even when his most powerful ally, Barack Obama of the United States, says stop the settlements?
Well, maybe you will be surprised, but I don't agree with the enthusiastic words of our Prime Minister that Jerusalem will be ever united and complete and so and so. This is, I think, only for internal politics, and it's not the real politics that the government of Israel should adopt, according to my view. I am sure that for a peace settlement, you need a compromise, and there will not be a compromise or a peace settlement with the Arabs or with the Palestinians when the times come and when we have a real partner, not just the Hamas, unless we will have some compromise in Jerusalem. I think that as a matter of compromise in Jerusalem, Israel will have no choice but to give up part of Jerusalem, probably in the north, but it's impossible to go and to give up all the Palestinian neighborhoods as President Clinton once offered, because in this way all the Jewish neighborhoods will be under the danger of shooting and bombarding, as was one of the Jewish neighborhoods, Gilo, few years ago, that was shooting all the day from the Arab village of Bejala. So I think compromise will be needed, including giving up part of Jerusalem. But let me tell you, this is not the whole solution, because the real problem is not the giving up or the compromise of the Arab neighborhoods, but who will govern the old city, or what we call the Holy Basin, and especially the Temple Mount. If you want me to elaborate on my view on this subject, please ask me about it.
You know, I want to keep moving because I want to get some more thoughts from our viewers, but thank you, from our guests, I should say. Let me just read something to all of you, actually. This is from Frédéric Desagneaux. He is from the French Foreign Ministry. This is international reaction. He says, the declaration made by the Israeli Prime Minister in Jerusalem prejudices the final status agreement. We reiterate the need for a freeze on colonisation activities, including those linked to natural population growth. Jad Ishak in Bethlehem, let me come to you. I mean, what he says there is indicative of what a lot of international community says, the UN, the EU, the US, whoever you like. But in the end, it's really just words. No one follows up on this sort of stuff.
Well, I think that what the Prime Minister of Israel is saying is really null and void for me as a Palestinian. And the unilateral actions of Israel by declaring the municipal boundaries of Jerusalem and strangulating Palestinian communities meanwhile, for me, cannot consider Gilo except a settlement. Gilo was not built on the borders of Jerusalem. The municipality of Jerusalem, according to the pre-47, Gilo land is on Bejala land. Har Homa is on Bethlehem land. These are settlements which are exactly similar to any other settlement in the West Bank. And what
you say, sorry, I'll interrupt you. What you say is backed up. I mean, so much of the international community agrees with what you say, but they don't do anything about it, do they?
Well, I think they have a responsibility. It's the international community which put forward the partition plan. It is the international community which put together the 242. It's the international community which put the ICJ, which became a General Assembly resolution. I can't see that the international community will have double standards dealing with every country that violates Security Council resolutions and UN resolutions in one way, but for Israel, Israel is the sacred cow. It's allowed to violate the international law and the international legitimacy and will not be brought into this compliance with these international norms.
Danny Seideman in Jerusalem, let me come back to you. And again, quite interesting early in the show, you said you couldn't really view this as a legal issue on its own. It's a social issue as well, given all the history. But following on from what Jad Ishak said there, why is it that there are these so-called legal things, binding Security Council resolutions out there over Jerusalem, over the future, over the partition, and yet, again, as I said, nothing really happens?
I believe, and I certainly hope, the rules of engagement are changing, and I look forward to that. When I hear my Prime Minister talk about the undivided Jerusalem, he reminds me of a Japanese soldier hunkering down in a cave in 1951, and they had just forgotten to tell him that the war was over. The mantra of undivided Jerusalem is dead. Israelis don't believe it. Palestinians don't believe it. The international community doesn't believe it. The only solution to my conflict with Jad Ishak, not individually, but as an Israeli and a Palestinian, is the two-state solution. And the two-state solution applies to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a divided city and will be a politically divided city. And when this representative of the French Foreign Ministry engages Israel on a settlement freeze, he's not acting in a way that's hostile to Israel. He is acting as a friend of Israel, because friends don't let friends drive drunk. Settlement expansion in Jerusalem, it jeopardizes the two-state solution. And the only alternative to the two-state solution is the one-state consequence, which is the death of an independent Palestine and an independent Israel as we know it. A settlement freeze is of cardinal interest to Israelis, and more Israelis, and certainly more friends of Israel, realize that.
Shmuel Berkovich in Jerusalem, and I thought it was quite interesting, and I was surprised when you said earlier that you didn't necessarily agree with what the Israeli Prime Minister was saying. Do you think his view will change at all? We've been talking, the word that's been coming up is compromise. There needs to be compromise. Do you think he will actually make compromise?
Well, I'm sure Mr. Netanyahu will make a compromise either willingly or forcibly. I must remind you that he has signed as a Prime Minister a previous agreement with the Palestinians, the Y agreement or the Nablus agreement, and he was ready to give up certain territories, occupied territories. The same goes for the disengagement in Gaza Strip. Mr. Netanyahu, when he was not then a prime minister, but he voted 3 or 4 times for the disengagement of our forces from the Gaza Strip, which means, according to a well-known song in Israel, what you see from here, you don't see from there. I mean, there is no choice. If you want a peace settlement, you need a compromise. And at Jerusalem is very important for the Palestinians. A compromise is needed also in Jerusalem. But the superior consideration are the security consideration. And we can't return back, we can't give back all the Arab surroundings, all the Arab neighborhoods, because they are too close to the Jewish neighborhood. So a compromise should be needed, keeping the security reasons on one side and giving the Arabs some of their neighborhoods on the other side.
There you go. If any Israeli or Palestinian leaders are watching the show, compromise is the word we've all come up with. My thanks to all our guests. Unfortunately, out of time on Inside Story, but Danny Seidman there in Jerusalem, Jad Ishak in Bethlehem, and also Shmuel Berkovich in Jerusalem. Gentlemen, thank you for your time, and thank you to our viewers, as always, for joining us here for Inside Story. Got a comment, got a suggestion? Send it to us. Please do. InsideStory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, it's goodbye for now.